Riona Kelso had promised herself she would sleep from takeoff to touchdown, a small mercy on a red-eye she'd booked with the last of her comp time. The hospital's fluorescent hours were still buzzing in her skull, all those beeps and alerts stitched into a kind of second heartbeat that kept her too alert to rest. She'd chosen a window seat near the wing because engines lulled her like ocean surf, and because she liked the ritual of looking down at the world and reminding herself people everywhere were making breakfast, or fighting, or kissing a forehead before school. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. She clicked her seatbelt and leaned her head against cool plastic, counting breaths the way she taught parents to count when the nights got long and their child's fever made a map of worry lines across their brow. 4 in, hold for 4, 6 out. She had done her time with alarms for a while. She wanted quiet, but quiet doesn't always board your flight. 3 rows ahead, a boy's voice shattered not into words, but into jagged sound. High, keening, the kind of panic that has its own weather system. A tangle of limbs, maybe 8 years old, maybe 10, was stiffening in the aisle as if a lightning rod had replaced his spine. A flight attendant reached for him and then thought better of it, palms up, soft voice failing to be heard over the boy's scream. The cabin air shifted. The sighs and eye rolls began like a slow storm. Phones peered over seatbacks to capture what they did not understand. Riona flinched before she stood, nurse muscle memory. Exhaustion argued, training won. "Hi," she said when she reached the row, which was a nonsense word in a wind tunnel. The boy's mother, late 30s, eyes like glass on the brink of shattering, was cupping his face and trembling. "He hates the door, and the belt, and the noise. He can't." Words tripped over panic. The boy's heels hammered the floor. Passengers tusked like metronomes for judgment. Riona crouched without crowding. She sank lower than the boy's eyeline, making herself small. "Hey, traveler," she tried again, voice nearly a hum. She did not touch him. "You don't know me. That's okay. You don't have to. My name is Riona. May I sit on the floor with you while this is loud?" She kept a rhythm, a predictable cadence to give his nervous system a rail to hold. The boy's scream collapsed into harsh, gulped breaths. Riona watched his hands, fingers splayed, nails pale, wrists rigid. She knew the constellation: sensory overload, ritual broken, a closed space pretending to be a sky. Somewhere behind her, someone said, "If he can't behave, they should just—" and stopped when the flight attendant shot a look like a blade. Riona turned her head so the boy could watch her move. "Too bright?" she asked. He flinched and swallowed without nodding. She glanced at the lights above them and at the window shade he'd clawed half open and half closed. "Okay, we can make a cave. You can be in charge of the cave." She said cave the way she said superpower to the kids who hated blood draws, making it a costume and not a prison. She slid her cardigan off and with the mother's shredded scarf, fashioned a tent from the seat back and armrest. A dimmer switch made a softness. The boy immediately angled his body under the shadow as if it were an instruction he had been waiting to receive all day. "What's his name?" she asked the mother. "Arlo." The mother's voice broke on the vowel. "Arlo," Riona said, letting the name be the safe thing in the room. She glanced up at the nearest attendant. "We need the safety card and 2 cups," she whispered. Confusion flickered, then the attendant nodded and returned quickly with the plastic cups and the laminated card that had seen more eyes than the pilot had stars. Riona held the card like a treasure map and whispered, still steady, still musical, "Arlo, this card is a picture story for the airplane. Can you help me read it?" Reading was not required, pattern was. She pointed to the tiny icons of stick figures, sitting and belts clicking. First, sitting, next, belt, then clouds, then snack, then movie, then sleep, then lights on, then wheels bump, then doors. Her finger moved slowly, predictably. I will show you when each part is done. You can check the boxes in your head, okay? You are the boss of the picture story." His chest hitched. The scream was gone. The echo remained. He did not reach for the card, but his eyes tracked her finger. Riona rolled 2 napkins into spirals and tucked them under the rims of the cups to turn them into gentle muffs. "These are cloud listeners," she said. "They make the airplane sound like the ocean, only if you want." Arlo stared at the cups as if they were wolves and might bite. Then, with a movement so quick she was grateful she hadn't tried to help him, he clamped them over his ears and shuddered, shoulders dropping 1 vertebrae at a time. Across the aisle, a business traveler cleared his throat with theatrical annoyance. Riona didn't look up. She measured the cabin's patience the way she measured a kid's capillary refill, 2 seconds to color or trouble. They had maybe 3 minutes before impatience turned into opinions. She needed to buy time. "Can we dim this zone?" she asked the attendant, who was already dimming, "and hold the final door chime if possible?" She knew it might not be. Regulations were not feelings, but sometimes kindness and safety were synonyms. "Captain says we can pause the chime and keep lights low in this section through taxi. Seatbelt stays, though." Riona nodded. "Arlo," she said softly, "the picture story says belt clicks next. Would you like to do it yourself, or would you like Mom to help?" Choices were oxygen to a nervous system suffocating on lack of control. Arlo's mouth twisted. He clicked his tongue rhythmically, tuck, 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 and then, astonishingly, reached for the belt. Threaded the metal through the buckle, missed, tried again, succeeded, flinched at the click, then froze, waiting for the pain that didn't come. Riona let the moment be a victory parade. "You did it," she said. "Not too bright, not too big. Praise can be an alarm if it's shouted." She mimed drawing a small tick in the air. Arlo's eyes followed, and something eased. The mother exhaled the kind of breath people exhale when the worst thing they could imagine isn't happening anymore. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the edge of the scarf tent like it was the one rope on a cliff. "He needs what's predictable," Riona said to the mother, not correcting, not lecturing, just translating. "We can make the airplane predictable in little squares." She moved her finger to the stick figure sitting with arms on armrests. "Sitting is checked. Belt is checked. Clouds are next. We can pretend the engine is the sea. Ready?" Arlo blinked. The cups stayed pressed to his ears as if they were the last 2 shells from a broken beach he'd been allowed to keep. Cabin doors closed with a muted thunk that did not set him off, and taxi began. Riona, still crouched, still smaller than everything else, let the boy see her breath slow down, let him mirror what biology could borrow when words were too expensive. As the plane turned and paused, she narrated the choreography like a bedtime routine. "The airplane is waiting its turn. Airplanes take turns like people. Taking turns feels like stopping, but it's moving. The lights outside are airplanes saying your turn next." The mother pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. The tremor that had owned her voice moved to her fingers instead. "He had a hard day. We missed the pre-board. He saw the jetway door close. He hates doors." Riona nodded. She didn't say, "It's not bad behavior, it's fear." She didn't say, "You don't owe anybody an apology." She kept the picture story in the air because meaning was the raft, not the sentence about it. The engine's roar deepened, and the cabin seated itself for ascent. Arlo's grip on the armrest went white, but he didn't scream. Riona kept the count going, slow and even. 4 in, she whispered, where only his nervous system could hear. Hold. 6 out. She breathed with him, giving his mirror neurons a script. When the plane tilted and gravity rearranged everyone's plans, Arlo's head knocked back against the seat and then forward. But he stayed under the tent. Riona did not flinch. "Wheels up is like the elevator in a tall building," she murmured. "Your tummy says, 'Where did the floor go?' But the floor is right there. You're doing brave."
The attendant kneeling in the aisle watched Riona with the relief of someone who'd found the right page in a manual they didn't know existed. "I can move you up to row 3, she mouthed to Riona over the cave. "More space." Riona shook her head. "He's mapped this row now," she whispered back. "Changing it is a new storm." The attendant nodded, grateful to be told what kindness looked like that minute. Minutes stretched into a new kind of quiet. The plane found its altitude, the engine's ocean steadied, the cart rattled with the familiar promises of pretzels and cans. Arlo's cup stayed on. He tracked the safety card with his eyes the way some kids tracked constellations. When Riona pointed to snack, he looked at the mother. "Crisps," he said abruptly, his first word brittle and earnest. The mother's hand flew to her mouth as if to catch a sob and turn it into a laugh before it escaped. "Crisps," she echoed. "Yes!" Riona lifted her own cup of water. "I like salty ones," she said neutrally. "They taste like beaches." Arlo blinked again and, after a long consult with himself, reached for the small bag the attendant held like a ceremony. Riona pretended not to watch him navigate the tiny apocalypse of tearing the corner. He managed it. The salt hit his tongue. The earth, rotated on a different axis, remembered how to be round. The business traveler across the aisle put his phone away. "Didn't realize," he said to the window, as if the window had been the one irritated with the child's distress. Riona did not accept the apology because it wasn't hers to accept. She focused on the next square of the picture story. "Movie," she said to the blank screen on the seatback. "You can pick one. You can be the decider." She turned to the mother. "Does he have a favorite sound off?" The mother swiped through options with trembling competence. "He likes the one with the trains. And the Japanese cats." "Let's do trains. Trains have a rhythm. Trains are predictable." She turned on the captions and set the volume at a whisper, an ambient murmur hidden by the cup muffs. Arlo's shoulders dropped another notch. He watched the first scene with the unnaturally still attention of someone who had been scrambling up a cliff and found a ledge at last. Riona sat on the floor for as long as her knees allowed, then took the empty seat in their row when a kind stranger traded without making a show of it. She kept the cave up. She kept the picture story up. She let the mother's hand find hers in the between times and squeezed, once, like a lighthouse. "How do you know?" the mother whispered over the edge of the tent during a gentle stretch of sky. "How to say what you say?" Riona thought of the night shift boy who hated thermometers and the girl who only let you touch her wrist if you counted to 8 first. She thought of all the parents who had tried so hard for so long that the word sorry had become a reflex instead of a term that meant anything. His fear makes sense. It's loud, bright, new, and full of rules that feel like traps. So I give him something that is louder than fear. Pattern. A story his body can trust. The mother nodded like someone tasting a new spice and recognizing a flavor she couldn't name but had always wanted. They made it through movie and into sleep, one square at a time. When Arlo's head finally tipped toward his mother's shoulder and stayed, Riona let her own eyes close. The engine sang. The cabin became a cathedral of small mercies, blankets tucked, lights dimmed, strangers suddenly kin because a boy had led them all out of their own unexamined certainties and into patience. It didn't last. Mercy never does on a red-eye. Somewhere over a dark state with a name Riona could not have traced on a map with her finger, the seatbelt sign pinged awake and the plane shuddered. Turbulence stacked in rough decks under them. Arlo's eyes snapped open. Riona felt his body gather like a wave beginning to crest. The cups were still in place, but his hand searched frantically for something to anchor to. "Storm bumps," Riona said, instantly back to steady cadence. "Bumps mean air is moving. We will count 10 bumps. After 10, we decide if we need more counting." She refused to predict an end that wasn't hers to promise. Kids can smell lies in the dark. "1," she said when the plane dropped a small, insistent inch. 2. She felt his breath sink to the count.
The mother, white-knuckled, counted 2, lips moving. Around them, grown-ups made jokes, loud enough to hide their own frights. By 7, the bumps unclenched. The plane slid back to steady air as if it had found a new layer of sky. Arlo unfroze. The cups squeaked against his temples when he adjusted them. Riona pointed to the sleep icon again and drew a tiny check in the air. "We did bumps," she said, not making it bigger than it was. "We can go back to the ocean." He did. The second sleep was deeper. The mother slept too, face softened into someone who might have been 13 for a moment, all worry lines refreshed into the girl she'd been before fear carved its signatures. Riona watched them as if keeping vigil, and for the first time on the flight allowed her mind to wander. What if she had stayed in her seat? What if Arlo had spiraled? She thought of the videos she'd seen of children becoming content for other people's clicks. She felt the heat rise in her chest like anger. She breathed it into something useful, a new policy idea for her unit, a laminated picture story card for the pediatric wing that could become a standard. She smiled into the dark. She could email the nurse manager tomorrow. She could write the script tonight in the notes app she used for grocery lists and poems she never finished. A soft movement at the front of the cabin caught her eye. The lead flight attendant was speaking to someone in the galley, a man in a suit that fit like it had been told a secret, his profile half-lit by the beverage cart's glow. He wasn't crew. He had the bearing of someone who carries authority the way other people carry a wallet. He handed the attendant a business card. The attendant glanced toward Riona's row. Riona felt her stomach do a small, unnecessary acrobatics routine. She turned back to Arlo and the mother. It wasn't her business. This was not her shift. It was not even her aisle. She refolded the scarf to keep the cave from sagging. Dawn came like a rumor from the edge of the window shade, a lighter gray tucked into the black. The cabin began its waking rituals, bathroom doors clicking, coffee smells reconciling people to the reality of returning to Earth. Arlo skirred and blinked without melting. Riona pointed to the lights-on square, then the wheels bump. He startled at the gear thump and then recovered fast, like a kid who'd learned the rules mid-game and wanted to show you he knew them now. "Doors," he said, unexpected and clear. Riona looked at the mother, who seemed instantly on the verge of tears again for a different reason. "Doors," she echoed. "Yes, love. Doors. Last square." "Last square," Arlo repeated, and for the first time smiled. It was small and slanted like he'd borrowed it from someone else for a trial run. Riona felt something in her chest unspool slowly, a gold thread pulling free from a knot. Touchdown was a choreography of rubber and relief. The cabin erupted into that strange game where people unbuckle as if seconds were prizes. Riona kept her seat. Arlo, noble with his cups and his cave, kept his too. The plane taxied to the gate. The ding remained mercifully soft. The captain's voice came on unusually formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that all passengers in rows 5 through 15 remain seated for a brief moment upon arrival. We appreciate your cooperation." Heads snapped up like birds. Riona's shoulders rose a fraction before she told them to drop. The lead attendant, the one with the relieved eyes, knelt at their row. "Miss Kelso," she said, hushed. Riona blinked. She hadn't given her name. "Yes?" "There are folks at the gate who'd like a word. If that's all right. If it's not, we can ask them to wait." Riona looked to the mother instinctively, making sure this wasn't some new surprise for her first. The mother's mouth had fallen open. She squeezed Riona's hand. "It's okay," she whispered,
though Riona had no idea what it was. "Please, stay." The jet bridge rolled toward them with its mouth open and its breath of old carpet. The door hissed and then cracked. The attendant stood like a small, polite blockade between the row and the aisle, as if to ask the world to remember its manners for just 60 seconds. Riona saw them before anyone else did. 2 men in dark suits, the kind of dark that isn't a color, but an intention, with earpieces curled like translucent snails at their ears. Behind them, a third man with a face that she recognized without knowing why. One of those faces that sometimes appears on magazine covers next to phrases like disruptor and philanthropy and valuation exceeds. He was younger than the grainy profile photos and older than the way a camera made people ageless. His eyes were searching the cabin with the urgency of someone who has already calculated the cost of being too late in 100 currencies that have nothing to do with money. The businessman across the aisle said, "Whoa," without wisdom, and then realized he was narrating instead of thinking and shut his mouth. The man with the recognizable face stepped into the airplane. He did not look at anyone but the row with the cave and the cups and the picture story held like a passport between a child and the world. He did not look like power. He looked like a father whose heart had kept pace with an altitude the entire night and only now was remembering what gravity was for. The attendant stepped aside. The man took one breath and then another, and then his eyes landed on Riona as if someone had whispered directions into his ear. He said her name as if he had always known it. "Nurse, this story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story." "Nurse," he finished, voice snagging on urgency and gratitude all at once. "Kelso? Riona?" The name sounded strange in a stranger's mouth, too intimate and too careful at the same time. He was all sharp lines, softened by panic, the kind of man who lived inside headlines until the world turned an ordinary sentence into a statement about markets and influence. Up close, he was only a father whose heart had been sprinting the length of a continent. Riona rose, knees stiff, cave steady, one hand still holding the scarf in place because the last square on the picture story was doors, and the door was now a person with a name. "Yes, but he still has one square left." She tilted the safety card so he could see what Arlo saw, a door icon waiting to be checked. Something in the man's face changed at that, like a lock accepting a key it didn't know it needed. He crouched without being told, meeting his son where the world had been too big all night. "Arlo," he said, voice barely holding. "I'm here." Arlo shifted under the cave, the cup muffs still crowning him like seashells on a cliff. His eyes flicked from the card to the door to his father's tie pin, which caught the light and threw it back in precise geometry. The suit man removed the pin like a magician disarming his own trick and slipped it into his pocket, as if to say, "Nothing sharp, nothing bright, not right now." "Mara?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the boy. Riona realized his question was seeking the mother and found her immediately, the woman whose shoulders had held 3 hours of noise without collapsing. The mother nodded, mouth trembling open and then firm. "We have a square to check," Riona said, keeping cadence. "Doors. We get to decide how to open them. Arlo, you can choose. Door opens slow, like a yawn, or quick, like a blink. Choice is oxygen." She watched the decision travel across his face. "Yawn," he whispered, so soft it was almost the sound of the cups shifting. "Yawn it is," Riona said. She glanced at the lead attendant, who nodded once and signaled the jet bridge operator, with a motion that probably wasn't in any manual, "Slow it down like a sunrise." The door unlatched with a sound so gentle it could have only been negotiated. The jet bridge kissed the plane instead of biting it. Arlo's shoulders rose, held, and lowered. Riona drew a small check mark in the air. "Last square,"
she said. Last square, Arlo echoed. He didn't smile this time. He did something rarer. He steadied. The aisle remained a held breath by the captain's request. Passengers watched a little like parishioners and a little like people realizing they had nearly been unkind to a miracle. The row stood as a unit, mother, son, father, nurse, and moved as procession rather than traffic. On the threshold, Arlo hesitated. The edge where plane became tunnel was a seam. Seams can be traps. Riona angled the cave to stretch one more foot, making a tunnel within a tunnel. We'll go under, she said softly, like foxes. She dipped her head and led. He followed. The jet bridge smelled like old carpet and new metal, like every airport in the world had decided to share a hallway. Security men in dark suits held back a small, curious crowd that had somehow gathered, as if airports grew people like trees grew birds. Phones rose, some in reverence, some in appetite. Riona saw the mother's grip tightened in warning. The father's jaw flexed as if he were chewing his own worry into something he could swallow. No pictures, please, one of the suited men said, voice polite steel. A few phones obeyed, a few didn't. The father looked at Riona. There's a lounge. Quiet. We can... Riona shook her head once. He mapped this path now. If we deviate, we start over. She turned to Arlo. Next part of the picture story. Long tunnel, then a quieter room with soft chairs. After that, breakfast squares.
Breakfast, Arlo repeated, testing the word for splinters. Toast, the mother added, seizing the cue. With the honey you like. They made it 20 feet before the world tested them. A woman in a blazer stepped forward, brisk and kind in the way that means well but doesn't pause long enough for consent. Mr. Mercer, she said, so that was his name, falling into place like a puzzle piece, the press is already here. We can route you through the service corridor. There's a statement drafted. The clip from the plane is... She stopped when she finally saw the cups, the cave, the boy. We can do statements later, she amended, chastened by the quiet. Mercer's eyes flicked to Riona, as if she had more votes than he did. She didn't, and she did. Service corridor, Riona agreed, if the lights are steady and the alarms are asleep. She turned to the mother. Mara, is fluorescent a problem? Flicker and high-pitched hums. Then we'll give Arlo the map before we turn. She crouched, card steady. New picture story. 2 stairs, 1 metal door. Door is a yawn. We count 8 steps. Then 2, then toast. Arlo's lips moved like someone tasting a new language and finding it edible. 8, he said. 2. The service corridor opened its throat. The hum was there, the sound of electricity thinking about itself, but steady, no flicker. They turned. The crowd vanished like a wave recoiling from a reef. In the quiet, Mercer's thanks finally found words. I don't know how to, he began, and stopped, as if gratitude had too many syllables and not enough vowels. You gave him a world he could live in. I gave him a story. He did the living. She checked herself. Humility is honest, but she didn't want to make small the work that had cost her aching knees and a vigilance most people never learned to carry. And you followed. That matters. He nodded, and just for a breath, the executive mask slipped and the father showed. The one who had probably practiced boardroom silence to keep from shattering in lawyers' offices and doctor consults. I haven't always known how, he said quiet, how to follow him. Mara's eyes flicked to him in a way. You're learning, she said. There was a river of unsaid between them, but today they were building the same bridge. They reached the stairs. Riona squeezed Arlo's shoulder with her voice, not her hands. "When you're ready, 8, then 2. He went. Small shoes counted, heel to toe with ceremony. At the metal door, he froze, eyes locked on the red-lettered sign that said, "Alarm will sound if opened without authorization." "It won't," said the security man quickly. "Not this one." He keyed his badge and softened the threat with a beep that was a promise instead of a warning. "Just a yawn." The door yawned. They passed into the quieter room with soft chairs that airport designers pretend are living rooms until someone sits in them for more than 6 minutes. Arlo sagged into one and wrapped the scarf around his knees like fog. Mara exhaled a week's worth of breaths in a single shaky sigh. Riona felt the tired arrive all at once like a tide reversed. Mercer remained standing, as if speech was easier on his feet. He finally offered his name like a hand. "I'm Ilan. I should have led with that." He looked at Riona. "Thank you" seemed stupidly small, but thank you. He swallowed. "May we talk?" Riona glanced at Arlo and then Mara. "If Mara is comfortable and if Arlo is occupied." She turned to the boy. "Do you want to draw your picture story? I have a pen." He held out his hand like a king receiving tribute. She gave him her pen. He drew a rectangle and divided it into squares with the fierce concentration of a cartographer allocating continents. Mercer sat. The security men drifted to the perimeter, becoming furniture with eyes. The PR woman with the blazer hovered, and then, catching Riona's look, went to fetch honey toast, like a pilgrim who had suddenly a holier task. "I've spent 6 years building things I thought would make the world gentler for him. Money moves quickly in public, but the things that matter to Arlo move at the speed of a person kneeling and speaking softly and knowing the words to use. You did something in 15 minutes that 3 therapists and 1 private school have tried to teach me to do for 2 years. You translated him." Riona felt heat crawl up her neck. Praise can be destabilizing as criticism if you let it. "You were already doing most of it. You came down to him. You took off the pin. You didn't try to fix what wasn't broken." "I carry too many pins," he said, attempting a smile that had been asleep for a while. It woke clumsily and then stood up straight. "I want to help the way you helped, on scale. I started a foundation last year, Quiet Skies, to redesign travel for neurodivergent kids. We've done sensory maps at 3 airports, training modules, but it all feels like signage until someone like you walks into the frame and changes the movie." He paused. "Come lead it." The sentence landed between them like a suitcase with stickers from places Riona had never been. She thought of her unit, the kids who knew her laugh by its shadow, the mothers who had memorized the rhythm of her footsteps because hope has a sound. She thought of the laminated cards she wanted to design and how funding for anything that wasn't an IV bag arrived in hospital budgets like a rumor and left like a ghost. "I have a job," she said softly.
"I know," Elin said. "I also know your hospital is cutting 3 pediatric beds next quarter because reimbursement rates don't like children who need longer than a night. I'm the anonymous donor they ask for when they decide to be brave and fix something anyway." He held her gaze as if he understood that the only way to tell the truth about money was to make it personal. "I can fund your wing for 5 years. Or we can build something together that takes what you did in row 12 and prints it on the world." Riona's heart did the thing it does when the monitor beeps change, and you don't yet know if it's artifact or event. "I'm not a director," she said. I'm a bedside nurse." "You're an architect of calm," Elin said. "Title is a door. We can make it yawn." Mara returned with toast that glistened with honey like stained glass. Arlo accepted it with the solemnity of communion and drew a check in his picture square, labeled Toast. He glanced up at Elin, as if remembering that fathers are a part of the story too. "You came," he said, "factual and beautiful." "I did," Elin said, something breaking and healing in the space of the two words. "I will again." He turned back to Riona. "I know this is a lot. I don't want to drag you into my weather, but I also can't pretend you changed my son's world before the wheels even touched ground." Riona opened her phone to text her nurse manager about trading a shift, and froze. An email lit the screen like a flare. Subject, Unit Update. She skimmed the first two lines and felt the floor shift. RE, Budget. Effective next month, the hospital will close the pediatric observation bay overnight. Staff will be reassigned, new scheduling to follow. The observation bay was the breathing room for families who needed more than 4 hours and less than a full admission. It was where she did her best work. It was where picture stories were born and fear learned to take a nap. She swallowed. "They're closing our bay at night," she said, the words tasting like metal. Mara cursed softly under her toast. "Every time we find something that works, somebody decides it costs too much." Elin didn't make a speech. He took out his phone and typed with the focus of a man redirecting a river. He waited. The wait was a minute shaped like a year. His phone buzzed. "Done," he said quietly. "Covered for 2 years minimum. They'll get the email in an hour." He looked at Riona, suddenly awkward again. "I didn't say that to impress you. I said it because when a thing is breaking and you can fix it, you fix it." Riona stared at him in the small beige lounge where lives were rerouted between flights. Power is a currency, she thought, but so is knowledge of how to aim it. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "we do it my way. Parent panels that pay, training written by autistic adults, not just for them, sensory maps done with kids, not consultants. And we start with picture stories, laminated, downloadable, airline standard. No stock photos of smiling children who are actually models." Elin's smile this time was ready. Yes to all of it. Also, a traveling quiet room that fits into a gate area in 20 minutes, a certification badge airlines compete to earn, and scholarship funds for families who need to fly for medical care without going broke. He rubbed his forehead as if an idea had landed there and stretched. "And this is selfish. I'd like you to teach me how to be his father in places that scare him." Riona felt the yes gather like weather. She did not say it, not yet. The world had taught her that some doors asked to be opened slowly. "Arlo," she said instead, "do you want to help me make other picture stories for other kids who don't like doors?" He looked up from his drawing. He considered it the way some men consider mergers. "Yes," he said, crisp and decisive. He held up his rectangle, every square checked. "I can draw the doors." A sound outside the lounge door, raised voices, a pop of camera flashes like small implosions broke the tender geometry. The PR woman reappeared, cheeks flushed. "They found us anyway," she said, breathless. "We need to move now. The service elevator is blocked. The main hall is full." The security man's hand went to his earpiece, then dropped. "There's one more route, baggage level, but it's loud." Arlo went still, toast held midair. Loud is a word that has teeth. Riona scanned the room for materials and found a stack of blank boarding passes at the counter where the lounge kept pens chained like pets. She grabbed 3, stacked them in her palm like cards, and knelt. "New picture story," she said, making her voice the whole plan. 3 cards. Card 1, humming room. Card 2, moving stairs that go down. Card 3, car with soft seats. You hold the cards. You say when we flip, you are the captain. Arlo's gaze cleared like glass cleaned with patience. "Captain," he repeated, and took the cards. They moved as a small, determined continent, security in front, a PR tied behind. The 4 of them in the middle with their cards and their cave and their new map. The baggage level was a country of conveyor belts and beeping carts and signs that made no promises. The hum lived in the bones of the place. Arlo flinched once and then pressed the edge of card 1 with his thumb until it bent into a new shape that made sense to him. "Flip," he said, and they did. The moving stairs shuddered like something being taught to breathe. Riona stepped on first, then Arlo, then Mara, then Elin. A family by function, if not by paperwork. The escalator poured them into a hallway where an unmarked door waited with a guard beside it, who had the air of a man who liked rules but loved exceptions. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "back way's clear." He looked at Arlo and, without being told, turned off the radio clipped to his belt. Outside, the morning had decided to be opal instead of blue. The SUVs idled at the curb like punctuation. Elon's driver opened the rear door and then stepped back far enough to make space a kind of respect. Cart 3 was cars. Arlo flipped it with ceremony and climbed in. Riona stayed on the sidewalk, wind licking her hair into directions. "I need to—" She gestured vaguely toward a different terminal, toward a life that had grown out of night shifts in small rooms and the sound of beeping machines that she could interpret like weather. "Come with us now," Elon said, not commanding. "We'll drop you at your hotel, or the hospital if you want to make someone's morning by reversing a budget email. And then, when your shift brain sleeps, we talk again. Noon, or next week, or never, if that's what you need. I don't want to make your life louder. I want to give it a volume knob." Mara leaned out from the other side of the SUV, hands on the door frame like parentheses. "Whatever you decide," she said, sincerity a bright, steady light. "You gave him a flight. You gave me 3 hours where I wasn't apologizing. Nobody gets that for free. Thank you." Arlo peered over the seat, cups now a garland around his neck. He held up the boarding pass cards. "Captain," he reminded everyone, "because titles matter when they help." Riona laughed, the sound easing something old in her chest. "Aye, Captain." Final square, Ride to Toast, Part 2. Her phone buzzed again. Another email. Same subject line, different text. Addendum. Donor funded. PEDS OBS Bay maintained. Pilot program approved. Sensory travel kits. Contact Quiet Skies Foundation. She looked up at Elon. His hands were empty, as if for once he had chosen to carry nothing sharp at all. "I didn't—" he began, but stopped because they both knew he had. Her yes was in the air, assembled out of nights and needs and a boy who drew doors and a man who could make them yawn. She opened her mouth. A siren wailed at the far end of the curb, and ambulance lights cutting the pale morning into shards. A man on a bench folded in on himself, hand to chest, the color draining from his face, as if someone had pulled a plug. People shouted without organizing their fear. A woman cried, "Is there a doctor?" Riona's body didn't ask permission from her mind. It moved. She turned to Elon and Mara, eyes clear, apology already forming and dismissed as unnecessary. "Stay with him," she said to them, already running. "Keep the cards safe." She reached the man as he slid toward the concrete and was there before gravity finished what panic had started. "Sir, I'm Riona. I'm a nurse. We've got you." She checked for pulse, barked gentle orders for space, for aspirin, for someone to silence the radios. The ambulance angled in, time bent around competence. Behind her, Elon watched the woman he had tried to hire go do the thing that had made him want to hire her. He saw the shape of the yes change. Not smaller, not larger, just truer. When the paramedics took the man, breathing and rage pink returning to his cheeks, Riona stood, adrenaline humming in her bones like the baggage-level hum had hummed through the concrete. She turned back toward the SUV. Elon had stepped closer, careful, as if approaching a deer in a clearing. Arlo held the cards up like a small flag. Mara's eyes shone in the morning that had finally decided to be blue. "So," Elon said, voice almost a whisper, "will you—" A fourth SUV, unfamiliar and a little too black, swung to the curb and stopped crosswise like a period at the wrong part of a sentence. A man stepped out with a camera and a question that wasn't a question. "Miss Kelso, how does it feel to be the nurse who saved the billionaire's son?" Riona felt the old anger rise, at how quickly a child becomes content. A mother becomes scenery, a nurse becomes a soundbite. She stepped in front of the lens without anger, only gravity. "It feels," she said evenly, "like a boy did brave things and his parents helped." She turned to Elon, to Mara, to Arlo with his cards, "And we have work to do."
She nodded at the cameraman as if he were a door that could decide to behave. You can help by lowering your voice. He blinked, surprised by being turned into a person with a choice. The camera dipped. Elon opened the SUV door again, invitation made of quiet and possibility. Riona took one step, then another. The yes pressed against her teeth. Her phone buzzed a third time. A number she didn't know. A voicemail transcribed into a single line that felt like a coin tossing itself up but refusing to come down. Riona, this is admin. We need to talk about your future. Today. She looked from the phone to the boy, to the man who could make doors yawn, and to the mother who had learned to hold a scarf like a sky. She took a breath that belonged to no one but her, and finally said, 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.